Disciples, Master. We can see here in the Valley of Mexico that in the center there is a mountain. When we went to that mountain, we saw that there is a volcano located right in the center, and in its center there is a pyramid. Of course, it is destroyed now, but we also saw that there is a circular formation in the middle of the mountain where the pyramid is located. Because in the valley there are other ancient citadels, many cities, where on certain days of the year fire was lit for ceremonial rituals. From there, they used to send signals to the others. Is this true, Master? Yes, using snail shells. Exactly. They communicated among themselves using snail shells. The fire they lit served as a message sent to other cities. Yes, the ceremonial rituals of those nations, which were celebrated every 52 years, were the rejuvenation of fire, something customary in ancient times. Master, there they used oils and resins to start the fire. Am I correct? The sacred fire. Every 52 years, they had special celebrations, special rituals of the fire. Master, something I was allowed to perceive is that there are caverns inside the mountain containing a hidden treasure and also a temple of pure gold. Is this true, Master? Yes. I do not know if it is Moctezuma's treasure or who it belongs to. Master, well, Moctezuma's treasure is not there, but there is a treasure, isn't that true? There is a treasure, but it is not Moctezuma's. When the conquerors arrived, they hid it in the center of that mountain. Is this correct, Master? The Nahuatl gods deposited all their treasures there. As for the conquerors, I have not investigated that case. I mean, Master, that when the conquerors arrived, the native people hid their treasures. Yes. The native people hid their valuables, precious stones that symbolized certain allegorized virtues, etc., etc. That is obvious. Master, we do small meditations at each pyramid. Correct. Today we brought you this. In reality, I have not read, one could say almost nothing. I have not read about anthropology. However, I know everything about the Nahuatls and the Mayans. I know everything in its totality. It so happens that I had already known all of this. Why? Because in ancient times, I was associated with this great culture, both the Mayan and Nahuatl cultures. I used to come from Atlantis leading caravans. Master, at that time were there camels? Did they also come on camels? Yes, they used to come from the north of the Gulf of Mexico, where there was a strip of land that connected it with Africa through Atlantis. They traveled in caravans. They stayed in caravanscenes, a type of restaurant or cafe, or better said, a restaurant or hotel, where they would stop to rest. I always met the black people who came from Africa through Atlantis. I knew all of that, and many times I had to lead pilgrimages to Teotihuacan and Yucatan. I know all the wisdom of the ancient Nahuatls, Mayans, Toltecs, Zapotecs, and others. There are many heads with black features over there. I noticed this. It reminds me of the black initiates who used to come here. I repeat, I knew the ancient wisdom of the Mayans, Zapotecs, Toltecs, and others. I have hardly read anything about anthropology. More clearly, I have not read. What I know about these native matters is something I completely experienced myself. When the caravans came, arriving from the north of Africa, indeed from all of Africa, but especially the north, to this region, I witnessed many things. There were caravans that came through Atlantis. As I said, there was a strip of land that connected Africa with the north of the Gulf of Mexico. I saw many caravans of Africans who traveled through Atlantis to northern Mexico. I knew the black Africans who stayed in the caravanscenes. Black initiates were there as well. Even now, in remembering this, I see before me a person with black features, head, cheekbones, mouth, and African nose. Anthropologists have a specific name for this, of course. Well, I listen to what they say, but I speak about what I know. What they say is one thing, what I know is another. When someone observes those massive stone heads with African features, they can clearly see that they depict Africans, and that they preserve the memory of the black initiates who used to come from Africa through Atlantis. Africa did not have that name in that era. It was a small continent called Grabonsi. Yes, that continent was not large, it was the small continent of Grabonsi. Later, after Atlantis submerged, new lands rose from the ocean floor and were added to that continent, making it grow and expand. But during the time I am speaking of, the continent of Grabonsi was very small. The African initiates used to come from that continent through Atlantis and arrived in the northern region of the Gulf of Mexico. As a result, their descendants built monuments and carved those heads as a testimony to those African visitors. Truly, one can see that there is no relationship between these sculptures and the pre-Hispanic races that lived in this land. The features are completely African. What is their origin? They are a memory of that era. When Atlantis submerged, the strip of land that once connected Africa with the northern Gulf of Mexico disappeared, vanished beneath the ocean. That catastrophe brought colossal geological changes. For example, I enjoyed living in a peaceful valley that existed in what is now the Gulf of Mexico. With the Great Catastrophe, that valley was flooded, and today it forms the Gulf. Many kingdoms existed here then. I liked to travel from kingdom to kingdom. I visited all of them. They did not call themselves Mexico. They had different names, following the kings and their traditions. In that era, there were many kingdoms, many of them. I knew them all. All of the knowledge contained in those stones is profound esoteric knowledge. I have seen it, and I will explain it. I witnessed their rites in Yucatan, in ancient Tenochtitlan, and in neighboring regions. Let us consider something very curious. Those black stone heads do not match any of the cultures that existed here. They are something distinct, something unusual, something different, something that has no relationship with those ancient civilizations. Certainly they do not match, Master, neither the Nahuatl nor the Mayan. This is something we observed long ago. They do not match at all. Their features, their human expressions are different. No, they do not match. And those stones, Master, some of them are placed in different positions. Those enormous stones, why were they made that way? Ah, that is in Villahermosa, in Tabasco. I have seen them. They are said to belong to the Olmec culture. There is a rectangular construction made of huge monoliths, massive stones arranged roughly in this way. They are buried in the ground like a large cage in the center of the square. Above them are enormous stones like columns, but without regularity or symmetry. They are gigantic, like the size of a house. Each buried stone is about 6 meters high, spaced apart like the bars of a cage. Could it be the structure of a house that was later covered with something to make it habitable? It was covered with palms, grass, and other materials. Then they are the skeletons of houses. Yes, the structures of houses. But those huge stones were not carried there, as many people believe. No, in that era the stones were needed, using a formula that is now lost. They were needed using plants. The stones were needed on site. They did not carry them. They formed them in place. Does that explain the existence of the rounded stones? Yes. Master, a brother here knows someone who has the secret for kneading rocks. He possesses stones made in that way. Could you give us that formula, Master? Well, I do not have that formula, or I do not remember it at this moment. Perhaps I will remember it later, but right now I do not. Master, I want to ask another question. The valley in central Mexico, where the mountain with the treasure and the temple of gold is located, was it made by Mother Nature as a magnetic center? A kind of navel, an energetic point? Was it created consciously? There are many marvelous, extraordinary magnetic centers where various rites were celebrated at certain intervals, such as those performed in Yucatan. The most important was the rejuvenation of fire every 52 years. It was a very special rite. There is a cycle of fire every 52 years. Was the fire lit here in the center every 52 years? Well, it was rejuvenated. It was a renewal accompanied by an extraordinary liturgy that has been lost. Was it a change? Something new for everyone? It was the new fire, but all the liturgy of the fire has been lost. They used snail shells for fumigations, black, white, yellow, and red shells. These were burned and used in certain religious celebrations in which Venus was praised. Master, what relationship exists between the 7 stars, the Pleiades, and the sun? Because at the end of the 52-year cycle, those stars had to pass directly over the mountain. When the stars passed overhead, they were certain that at dawn the sun would appear once again. It was predicted that at the end of a 52-year cycle, the 5th sun might come to an end. Regarding the 52 years, does this mean that a larger cycle exists? We know that the annual cycle of 52 weeks completes a septenary, does it not? 7 times 52 is 364, so shouldn't there be a greater septenary? Naturally, just as within the cosmos there are other cosmoses, and within those still others, in the same way, within the 7 cycles of 52 years, there exists another set of 7 larger cycles that embrace all of humanity. Now, for example, we are within one of those greater cycles. We are in the 5th sun. In this era, we expect the great catastrophe. It will occur in the Catan 13 of the Mayans. When that Catan arrives, Catan 13 will begin in the year 2043. The Catan, is it also a cycle? Some say it lasts 20 years, but I believe it is 52 years. No, there are small cycles, and within the small cycles, there are larger cycles, and within the larger cycles, there are still greater ones. Catan 13 is something extraordinary. The year 2043 will begin Catan 13, and with the beginning of Catan 13, the great catastrophe will come. It occurs in the Mayan Catan 13. The Nahuatls affirmed that the children of the 5th sun will die through fire and earthquakes. But remember, there are 7 cycles, small cycles of 52 years, and within those 7 cycles of 52 years, the 5th sun gradually manifests itself in its full magnitude. For example, the 5th sun corresponds to the Aryan race, the 4th sun to the Atlantean race, the 3rd sun to the Lemurians, the 2nd sun to the Hyperboreans, and the 1st sun to the Polar. The protoplasmatic race. We are in the 5th sun, and at its conclusion, the great catastrophe of fire and earthquakes is expected. Now, regarding the Pleiades, indeed, there are people who come from the Pleiades. The Pleiades are related to the Atlantean archipelago. The 7 Pleiades correspond to the 7 major islands of Atlantis. The Nahuatls were descendants of Atlantis. They inherited this knowledge, which the Toltecs preserved from Atlantean times. So the 7 islands are very important. They relate, naturally, to the 7 sacred islands and the 7 races of humanity. If they passed directly over Cerro de la Estrella, it was because the ancients made precise calculations. They did not speak of meridians as we do. They simply said, they have passed. With this they could predict calamities, wars, and other events. All of this is marvelous, is it not? Therefore, Cerro de la Estrella was a place where cosmic forces received many rites. And of course, every 52 years, the rejuvenation of fire was celebrated there. Master, when we were there, even though we are intellectual animals, lunar animals, internally we felt a great euphoria. We felt the masters, we felt that there was something special there. On that day we felt great happiness, a joy in our hearts when we visited the place. You were refreshing in your memory the knowledge you had in the past. You were part of all of that. You knew the rituals that were celebrated there, on Cerro de la Estrella. Yes, Master. And I even saw myself in the era of the 52, when the fire was lit. My heart was there, and I believe we heard the words, "Finally, finally you are returning." Indeed, you were a priest in those lands, a priest and an old initiate. You worked in the temples of Anahuac, and now you must refresh your knowledge. As an ancient priest of Mexico, you possessed that knowledge. For example, when you took a rose, a flower, you knew how to observe it and interpret it. Through the petals you could reach the heart of the rose and find signs that allowed you to predict cosmic events. That was in ancient times, and today that knowledge has been lost. Now, to obtain some orientation, what you can do is count the number of petals. This will give you the arcanum and its relationship with the Pleiades. Master, today at 4 o'clock in the morning I woke up and I heard that I had just been consecrated as a priest of Tlaloc. Well, it is not that you were just consecrated. You are a priest. Master, there is something we have not yet told you, some experiences. We were in one of the pyramids. That is where we felt euphoric. Entering the temple of the Lord of the Eagles and the Lord of the Tigers, we found a container carved into the floor. The profane say it was used to place hearts in. We perceived that it was the place where the fire had been lit. So, although this is an archaeological zone with guards and so on, we dared to light a fire there. It turned into an oven. The fire began to burn as if it were being fanned by air. The fire rose in a marvelous form. We had to extinguish it because the guard was coming, but inwardly we felt great happiness. Then we heard the Master say that many thousands of years had passed since the fire had last been lit there, and that many thousands of years had passed since people like us had come, like the group of brothers who were once priests and priestesses. Then we went to another temple. We were welcomed with happiness. Later, we went to another one, where we were welcomed with great solemnity. They gave us a staff and some arrows. Finally, we went to the temple of Quetzalcoatl. On that occasion, we were received with great severity, not only with solemnity, but also with great severity. That is why we felt fear about returning, even though we eventually did. We went with 2 brothers, and on that occasion we were received with infinite care, infinite harmony, and great love. Yes, there were priests among the group. Speaking of lived experiences, this one is absolutely real. Then in Teotihuacan, inside a temple, we were given a cape covered with feathers. Naturally, we had never told anyone about that. Yes, that is your inheritance, your secret inheritance. Now you must rise again in order to officiate. You must officiate. In the temple we visited previously, before receiving the staff and the arrows, they said to us, "Finally you have returned, after a long pilgrimage, and a very long and difficult pilgrimage. Now you are on the path again. Now you must officiate once more, just as you did in those times." Remember, it was not only the Great Pyramid of Egypt that was oriented towards Sirius to mark the eras, but also the Pyramid of the Sun. Some temples and pyramids of that epoch were aligned towards Sirius. Sirius received much veneration not only in Egypt, but also among the ancient peoples of the Americas. In a pyramid in Guatemala, during an inner experience, I saw that I had been expelled from the temple because I had revealed secrets. I had never fully understood why the secret of the Great Arcanum, something humanity needs so much, was kept concealed. I remember being expelled from temples more than once for that reason. It was because you divulged the Great Arcanum. Revealing it was a violation. It was grave. In Egypt, for example, anyone who revealed the Great Arcanum was placed before a wall covered with lambskins and then beheaded. There is something very important, Master, which is the extraordinary cultural richness of the Mayans and Nahuatls, something that university researchers are now beginning to appreciate from a different perspective, and what immeasurable richness the Mayans possessed, and also the form of Christianity among them. What can we say, for example, about the decapitated figure that does not have 1 head, but 7, 2 groups of 3, crowned by the sublime 7th flame of fire that connects us with the One? With the law, with the Father. Where is that found? Among the Mayans. I found it carved in a stone. We were able to verify, Master, that each pyramid contains a defined type of wisdom. Each is specialized in something. For example, in one pyramid we could perceive the origin of humanity. In this sense, each pyramid has different doctrinal aspects. We also perceived that before the construction of the pyramids, there had been large bohios, huts or communal houses on those sites. Yes, before the pyramids were built, Atlantis was still fully active. The pyramids date back to Atlantean times, just like ancient Tenochtitlan, which at that time was not yet Nahuatl. It is not as the so-called super-civilized Spaniards believed, that it was founded in the year 1325 of our era. The culture of ancient Tenochtitlan, as well as the sacred land of Mayab, etc., belongs to the age of Atlantis, thousands and thousands of years ago. How could anyone imagine that such a civilization was built, as those simple Spaniards thought, practically overnight within 1 or 2 centuries? That is absurd. Are the pyramids of Egypt from the same era? No, the pyramids of ancient Mexico are older than those of Egypt. During the Atlantean era, there were countless pilgrimages, some toward Yucatan, others toward Mayab, and others toward Teotihuacan. These were places of pilgrimage. Egypt was another. Sometimes pilgrimages would go toward Egypt, and other times toward Mexico. All these journeys passed through Atlantis, but the constructions in Mexico are older than those in Egypt. There were many kingdoms in all these regions, extraordinary kingdoms, great cultures full of wisdom. For example, consider the god Pakal, not his real name, but we use Pakal so we can understand each other. Here in Palenque, he is even called the astronaut. He was not an astronaut, that is not true. Let us look, for instance, at the pectorals he wears and the 9 necklaces adorning him. These show that he was a real man who had worked in the forge of Cyclops, a true initiate. He has 3 necklaces around his neck, symbolizing that he crystallized within himself the 3 superior forces of nature and the cosmos. He has 10 rings, 1 on each finger, which indicates that he achieved self-realization. He crystallized the 10 Sephiroth of the Kabbalah in their total inner form. The sphere in his right hand and the cube in his left clearly represent that he possessed the cubic stone, the philosopher's stone. And the sphere signifies perfection. He had the absolute right to use the sphere. Keep in mind that we use the cross as an instrument of Christification, self-realization, purification, etc. But when one has attained all of that, when one is fully self-realized, one earns the right to use the sphere. The cross is an instrument, the sphere is mastery. This god Pakal, again, we use the profane name, handles the sphere because he achieved it. And what is god Pakal's real name? I have not investigated that. The entrance to his sepulchre is sealed day and night with a triangular stone, symbolizing the holy Triamazakamno, a man who crystallized within himself the 3 primary forces of nature and the cosmos, a perfect man. One must descend to reach the tomb. This teaches that in order to ascend, one must first descend. He was buried along with beheaded individuals. 6 men were decapitated so they could be interred with Pakal, their heads severed in blood. A barbaric act, is it not? Through that act, they sought to demonstrate that Pakal had eliminated all his psychological aggregates. And if we consider the 6-pointed star, the Star of Solomon, the star that emerges from the chaos of the microcosmic human, if we also reflect on the phrase, lux in tenebris lucet, the light shines in the darkness, the star arises from the chaos, we will understand its profound meaning. It is the seal of Solomon. The 6 points are masculine. The 6 deep recesses between each point are feminine. These 12 radiations crystallize through sexual alchemy in the 12 zodiacal constellations. Let us consider the 6th mystery. Without it, it is impossible to operate in the sexual ministry. Without it, the 24th mystery, the spinner or weaver of the tarot, could not function. How could it function? Only through the sixth mystery can the 24th mystery operate. The 24th contains the sixth within it, but the sixth is indispensable for the great work. That sixth mystery is the man or woman in love, love itself, and it belongs to the sphere of Tifereth in Hebrew Kabbalah, the Christic region of the Tree of Life. Pakal's soul is a Christic human soul, a soul that achieved perfect Christification and the complete beheading of all psychological aggregates. He passed through the beheading of John the Baptist, through the beheading of the innocents, and finally attained total Christification. To testify to this terrible truth, 6 men were beheaded and buried with him, and the tomb was sealed. Master, who in reality are the 24 elders that appear in the Apocalypse? The 24 elders are 24 parts of our being. We have said that the zodiac has 24 masters. Many testimonies and books list the names of these 24 masters, or 24 orders of adepts. The 24 macrocosmic elders are one thing, the regents within ourselves are another. The powers of the 24 elders reside around the pineal gland. They are atoms, atomic gods, that awaken and develop when one achieves Christification. Thus, when a man or woman attains resurrection, the 24 elders within, the 24 fundamental parts of the being, cast their crowns of triumph, of the zodiac, at the feet of the Lamb of God, at the feet of the inner Christ. Let us now consider the gravestone on the sepulchre. Many who examined it believed Pakal was an astronaut. That is not accurate. We do not deny that there are Martian glyphs. We do not deny that. We also do not deny that he was an initiate of the occult tradition of Mars. That much is correct. But that is entirely different from claiming he was from Mars or from another planet. That is untrue. The cross formed from a cornstalk shown on the stone speaks clearly. We know what corn, wheat, and rice represent. The sacred mercury of the secret philosophy. That mercury is the metallic soul of the sacred sperm. In other words, the seed, the germ of the human being. It is profoundly significant. Corn was venerated, an object of cult, among the ancient Nahuatls, Mayans, Toltecs, Zapotecs, and others because it represented the seed. In a more esoteric sense, it represented the metallic soul of the sperm, the result of the transformations of the sacred sperm, the exioheri. Since within this lies the realization of the human being, it was necessary to venerate it. The cornstalk cross indicates the legitimate connection of the lingam and yoni to produce the mercury of the secret philosophy, and thus attain Christification. He is depicted as separating himself from the stem, which many mistakenly believe to be a machine he is operating. It is not. His separation from the stem signifies that through the cross one may descend, and through the cross one may ascend. That is the cross correctly understood, as it must be comprehended. There are other signs there. I believe Sirius appears, etc. In any case, what is represented is an avatar in the fullest sense of the word. An avatar, a man who brought a message to humanity, to the Maya, a true messenger of the superior worlds. He wears a jade mask to symbolize his greatness, and also that no one is worthy to gaze directly upon his face. The mask, of course, suffered damage over time, but has been restored. The people of Palenque complain greatly because the officials of academic science looted the tomb, especially because they took the skull. They demanded from the President of Mexico the return of the skull. They did not wish to return it, which is deeply unfortunate. I explored that entire region around Palenque and found a funerary city, a temple of vast sepulchre hidden underground in the jungle. I went into the jungle to explore. I walked along a small river in the midst of dense vegetation, visiting the sepulchre. All of this is truly fascinating. But one thing is the great message that Palenque conveys, and another is the message of Cancun. Each region has its own message. For example, one could not understand the descent of the Logos in his triune aspect as the holy Triamazakamno who fertilizes chaotic matter and crystallizes into the world without the life, passion, death, and resurrection of our Lord Quetzalcoatl. That is why in a temple of the Mayab, while investigating Quetzalcoatl, I found on the main facade the depiction of the descent of the Logos, his feet raised upward as he descends into matter. And there as well, carved in stone, one finds the entire life, passion, death, resurrection, and ascension of our Lord Quetzalcoatl. The doctrine was accepted among the Maya in the same form in which it had been taught by the Nahuatl peoples. Precisely so that this biological truth, the descent of the Logos into matter and his later reascension, could be explained. Through that sacred drama, the descent and ascent of the Logos can be understood in dialectical form. About the human sacrifices to the god Tlaloc in pre-Columbian Mexico, what can you tell us, Master? Regarding Tlaloc, there were certain doubts. I spoke to him about reproaches made against him in the causal world. I asked him, why did you permit the human sacrifices, children and women, in the physical world? And he replied, it was not my fault. I never required such sacrifices. He also told me, I will return in the new age of Aquarius. I understand that he will have a physical body in the golden age after the great catastrophe that is approaching. He will incarnate physically in the golden age of the future sixth root race. Then the resurrection of the gods will come. Yes, the resurrection of the gods is coming, and Tlaloc will have a physical body. Will the cult of the gods be restored in the future sixth root race? Yes, sir. The cult of the gods will be restored. Once again, the sacred cults of the gods will return. Until now, exclusive monotheism, rejecting the holy gods, has not been a blessing for humanity. On the contrary, it has been a curse. When humanity rejected the gods, its corruption began, leading to the condition in which it now finds itself. Are the gods intermediaries? Yes, the gods are the intermediaries between humanity and the eternal common cosmic Father. Why did this cult not survive after the coming of Jesus, the great Kabir? Was he a monotheist? If not, why did he not say so clearly? Our Lord the Christ was a polytheist. Jesus of Nazareth was not a monotheist. Remember his words, you are gods. It is written in the gospel. Is it not written in your law? I said, ye are gods. Jesus said, you are gods. He never spoke against the gods. When? Those condemnations are inventions of the people. He never opposed the holy gods. I have not seen the Bible speak about the gods. The Apocalypse, for example, speaks of angels. And what are angels, if not gods? That they now receive another name is another matter, but they are the same gods. Master, what is the hierarchical order of these gods whom we now call angels? The order is angels, archangels, principalities, powers, virtues, dominions, thrones, cherubim, seraphim, and many more. In any case, the angels are the same gods. These are the holy gods. This does not mean that because we venerate the holy gods, we diminish the eternal cosmic common Father. Never have we denied the eternal cosmic common Father. What we deny is the God of orthodox dogma, the terrible, vengeful deity of the law, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. The truth is that God is not a single person, human or divine. God is gods, the army of the voice, the great word, the verb, the creative logos, the perfect multiple unity. The word Elohim, or Elohim, which is translated as God, in fact means gods and goddesses. A religion without goddesses is already halfway down the road toward complete atheism. Inferential peace. Samael Aun Weor.